Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on our platforms. Please reach out to me. I am tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing a model that was a bit of a breakthrough. The Rolex Oyster Perpetual GMT-Master II 126720 VTNR. This came out in 2022. Our first series production Lefty GMT, our first green Bezel GMT, and this one with the connoisseur's choice Jubilee bracelet. So let's take a look at this 126720 VTNR in oyster steel. That's 904L steel, 40 millimeters in diameter. That hasn't changed. 12.1 millimeters thick from lug tip to lug tip. 48.1 millimeters, and from end link to end link, the total distance across the wrist, 49.5 millimeters with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference. My wrist is not large, but the watch, fortunately, is nice universal size. I've seen women wear this and really pull it off well, so I can consider it unisex. I would estimate that on this bracelet, it wears a little bit more compact than on the Oyster. So I could see this working well on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. Being just fractionally over 12 millimeters, it sits low, and thanks to the crown and the crown guard, a sleeve will easily ramp up over the side of it. So this is a watch you can easily wear with tight sleeves and formal attire. Here's your over-the-top shot. You can see even in this shot, which makes the watch look broader than it is, the lugs are not over the edge of my wrist, and you can see even better down the barrel, the lugs are nowhere near encroaching on the edge. Taking a quick look, this is the Jubilee bracelet, which for decades has generally been an option on GMT Masters. Now, for the first six-digit generation that bowed in 2005, the Jubilee wasn't really a thing, but it came back with the 2018 model year redesign of the GMT collection, and so you can get this watch on Oyster or Jubilee. The thing about the modern Jubilee, though, is unlike vintage examples, which featured hollow center links and a tinsel-like quality in the hand and on the wrist, this is quite robust. You can see the links are all solid, and with plenty of gaps between links on the bottom, this winds up venting better than the Oyster Sports bracelet. So when you combine that with its structural integrity, the Super Jubilee, as this is sometimes known, is actually a great sports bracelet. And you can see it's a combination of small polished links, larger tapered satinated primary links that are polished on their outer face. You can see that conforming end link that mates it to the case, and then the taper down towards the clasp. We have many individual removable links fixed by screws, so you're going to find the right fit. But if you need to tailor more, there's a tool-free snap-in, snap-out 5mm easy link adjustment system. And then if you look inside the clasp, you can see that there are 3 pairs of divots with little tracks leading into them. So you can use your strap tool to dismount the spring bar and change the anchoring point of the bracelet in the clasp. The clasp is a single swing arm with thick gauge polished steel. It has a beak and a hook system with an articulated lift lock that's also spring loaded. So you can see the beak and the hook system, and this latches once, and then the clamshell is the second latch, so it has double locking. Rolling around to the case, you can see we're still very much in the era of the super case. We have 20mm spacing between the lugs, and by super case I mean that shape that debuted in 2005 with a sheer, largely vertical case band and then squared off lug hoods and lug ends. Satin on the lug hoods, polish on the flanks. Rolex has its own foundry. It actually makes its own alloys, cases, clasps, and bracelets. They use a high nickel steel called 904L. Rolex brands this as oyster steel, and the advantage is that in addition to resistant to certain acids, the practical advantage is if you get sweat on the watch or sea salt, it doesn't even need to be rinsed. It will not corrode. It is particularly resistant to corrosion. Now we've got a screw down crown here, and although it is a triplock crown, which usually denotes a dive watch in Rolex catalog, this is actually a 100-meter watch, but with the triplock crown, I've always wondered whether the GMT, for example, is actually more than its rated 100-meter depth. I'm not going to endorse more than 100, but the triplock is overkill for a 100-meter watch. Now we also have a oyster-style screwed-in case back. And so this watch does feature an unconventional 9 o'clock side date. So if you want to wind this watch, the way to really do it is to turn it upside down and then turn in a clockwise direction. I know a lot of folks want to know how it looks when you set it. Well, here you can see stop seconds or hacking. You can also see that green hand moves at 1/2 the speed of the local hours. The green hand is the reference time. The Mercedes hand, the short one, is your local time. Local time is in 12-hour format. Reference time is in 24-hour format. Some people have asked me, what does it look like when the date changes? Well, you could see, it looks like that. It just pops up from the bottom. And this uses the same caliber 3285 movement as a standard GMT. Cyclops eye magnifier to make it easier to read the date in its little aperture. And we'll do a quick lume shot so you can see this dial. By the way, the hands as well as the indices, they are solid gold so that they won't tarnish or oxidize over time. The dial is a glassy smooth black lacquer. And I'm going to do a lights out right now. And you can see all 4 hands loomed. The reference time, the local time, and the seconds hand, so you know the watch is running even in the dark. So now the bezel allows you to read a 3rd time zone. The first GMT-Master II came out in 1983, and that was the first time you were able to set the local hour independently from the reference hour. And we'll get a little bit closer here. You use this bezel to calculate the GMT offset of your destination, and you generally set the 24-hour hand to Greenwich Mean Time if you're going to do this. So then you can offset by adding or subtracting from GMT and then read the time at your destination on the bezel. So you can read 3 time zones temporarily. So what else is going on? Well, we have this first ever bicolor black and green GMT bezel. The Cerachrome ceramic is highly scratch resistant, and then there are platinum deposits to create these silvery indices and characters, and so that will never discolor with time. Just like the white gold hands and indices on the dial, it is basically inert. Underneath the case back, though you can't see it, Rolex caliber 3285, bidirectional winding on a ball bearing. It's no longer a jeweled staff. That's more shock resistant. The ball bearing, 70-hour power reserve, a chronergy escapement that's formed with Liga to improve power reserve, reduce servicing needs, and improve chronometry. It also has a reprofiled drivetrain compared to previous 3186s. And it has a thinner mainspring barrel wall, but a bigger mainspring to help it get up to those 70 hours of power reserve. 4 Hertz beat rate, 31 pivot joules. It has the dual time in 12 and 24-hour format, the stop seconds function, or hacking. It is certified as a COSC chronometer, but after certifying the bare movement, Rolex cases it up, tests it as a full watch in 6 positions, not 5 like the chronometer, and then Rolex attests that this watch is now a superlative chronometer at the time it leaves the factory, which means no worse than -2 + 2 seconds per 24 hours as a fully assembled watch. Also important, the watch has a full balance bridge and a free sprung balance for shock tolerance. The free sprung balance, along with the Microstella variable inertia nuts on the balance rim, make the balance very shock tolerant, but also allow for very precise incremental timing adjustments. Those Microstella nuts on the free sprung balance are Rolex innovation. There is a Breguet profile overcoil hairspring that allows the watch to keep a very consistent time in any position. And then we have the hairspring being made of a blue oxidized niobium zirconium that Rolex calls Powerchrome Blue. It's very resistant to further corrosion because it's already oxidized, and then it's immensely anti-magnetic. So this watch winds up being shock resistant, anti-magnetic, and water resistant. So though this is perhaps the dressier version of the GMT-Master II on the Jubilee bracelet, nevertheless, it can easily pull double duty as a sports watch. And since 1954, that sport has been aviation, as the original GMT-Master was created as a special project for Pan Am Airways for pilots to calculate the time at their destination airports. Today, it is the ultimate flying companion, whether you're in the cockpit or the cabin, or just an armchair aviator. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.